week or so.
Breaking out into the woods. So this story took place back in 2017. Instead of using my friends' actual names, I will refer to them respectively 1, 2, myself, 3 and 4 in order to keep most of them anonymous, because honestly most of these dudes are already into conspiracy theories and are always on some tangent about how the government is watching them. Not to mention this is some potentially incriminating stuff. The 4 of us were in the car, driving on Highway I-80, heading west to find a spot to camp for a week or so. We didn't have a definite destination, so we agreed on doing this trip as spontaneous as possible. The only thing that we planned on was that ultimately after we camp, we would end up somewhere outside Sacramento and stay in their neck of woods for a week or two before flying home to Texas. 1 is a pretty boy that's quiet, kinda mysterious, and basically only speaks when necessary. Has military background in Afghanistan. Really nice guy that at first gives off a slightly racist school shooter vibe. 2, me, the youngest of the group by about 2 years. I'll emphasize that even though I'm familiar with using firearms, I do not have any sort of military background like all of these guys do. Even though 4 was only in the military for 6 months and still got benefits, he's owned guns his whole life. 3 is my longtime friend that's originally from Texas, but he now lives in California. He brought his friend 4 to tag along. 3 kinda acts like my older brother in the sense that he is always getting me in crazy situations, but 3 is like 6 feet 3 and 230 pounds, so he has always been there, quick to back me up if anyone tries to fuck with me. 4 is always tagging along with 3, but overall, 4 really just a lazy buddy they know from their military days. Rich kid that would prefer to hand out his credit card in order for him to be even more lazy and avoid doing anything. But to be honest, he always buys food and gas, but other than that he does nothing but roll blunts for everyone around him. Our buddies named 1 and 4 are originally from California, while myself and my buddy 3 are both originally from Texas. 3 has been a Texas expat for almost 4 years now, but I swear he is already starting to act like a native Californian. But he's a wild man, and if he catches anybody talking shit about Texas, he will shoot up out of where he is and confront them no matter where or why. We are all co-workers for a campaign we're canvassing, knocking doors and hanging out flyers for a campaign in Reno for the last 4 months. After living, working, and hanging out with the same group of 4 people, we became insanely close, and we are still tied to this very day. Election day came and went, which resulted in our candidate's loss. Now we have 6 weeks off, and we decide to drive back to their towns near Sacramento, where 4, 3 and 1 all live. The election work we do is menial, and basically just knocking doors and handing out flyers and attending events. I enjoy it, but it is something we don't really care about personally, but it paid us pretty good money and provided us with rental cars and hotels most of the time. Election day come and our candidate lost, so our company had given us over a month off. 3 and 4 are trying to show me, who is always talking down on California's bullshit, to experience what they call the NorCal experience, which they're so proud of. They want to show him how free and wild California really is. So 3 and 4 decide for all of us to go on some aimless trip to go camp in North California, which means drive through Northern California and camp out for a few days while they shoot guns and smoke all their weed. 3 or 4 insisted that afterwards, we plan to eventually make it to Sacramento to hang out in their old neighborhood and show us around. So now it's been me, a few of my friends in the car, driving on I-80 heading west towards Sacramento. We spent our final day in Reno finding camping gear for me and 4. One thing led another, and we went ahead bought quite a few guns before we left Nevada with my Texas driver license, which allowed me to buy essentially whatever I wanted. Some we pulled our money together and purchased a few shotguns, a carbon fiber looking AR and 2 9mm pistols that we bought from a gun show. Then we went to a shop in Reno that sold us, I meant me, a couple of bought us AK-47s that only shot .22 LR. Not much bang but still a lot of fun. Stopped at a dispensary where Four used his family business credit card and bought 4 ounces of weed for the trip. We headed down I-80 heading west from Reno. After about 3.5 hours of driving through the night, we finally make it to a piece of land that's owned by the Bureau of Land Management about an hour and a half outside a small town called Grass Valley, and start shooting pumpkin heads we bought at a Walmart back in Reno. After shooting for a few hours, it's about midnight. 3 proposes a blunt break, and we park the truck. 4 and 3 find a thick collection of bamboo trees that have been knocked over by a fallen Douglas fir tree that's creating a platform that was about 18 feet tall, and they could all walk and jump around on with ease. We were just being boys in the woods. 4 and 3 decide to grab a few of rolled blunts so we can go smoke out top the bamboo deck. 1 is reluctant to go, but 2 encourages him not to stay alone, and by pointing out that the truck is parked in at least a somewhat tactical position, completely concealed by brush and shadows. We are smoking out on their new little bamboo spot, which is about 200 feet or so from the car, when we all hear an engine kind of idling and humming around, but they can't actually see it. The car eventually comes down the little trail road, then shines its brights on the area which we had been shooting up, in which had a bunch of plastic pumpkin head pieces all over the ground, so it's clear they probably observed that there were some fuckers nearby. The car sits there and idles for a while, but then we decide to quickly put out the blunts. Then down the music and lock their phones. The car that pulls up on them is a lowrider Mark LT from the early 80s or late 70s, but it's kind of like a lowrider cholo car and doesn't really seem to be in the right setting considering they're in the middle of nowhere. Just really out of place. We decide to stay up in our tree hut and monitor the situation from up here until we all decide the coast is clear. So with all things considered, best case scenario, it was a Fed, or could have been a game warden or someone from that tier of land management. Could hit us up with a huge fine for trespassing. I'm 99.999% sure some of these guns are illegal in California. I'm pretty sure a shit ton of weed escalates whatever they want to charge us with. Keep in mind we are in the middle of nowhere, almost 2 hours away from the closest town that has a population of 500. Not only are there 1 million trees between us and the nearest civilization, but it's also about 100 miles of valleys, cliffs, and mountains. This is the type of deep wood ship where no one can hear you scream. Then one chimes in and says not to mention thousands of people go missing every year doing shit like this, so it's always good to stay on your toes. Not to mention, there's a bunch of fucking weirdos that set up shop and build a cabin and try to live off-grid, so there's a lot of times where they will find themselves in need of something like a car, cash, or weapons that they themselves can turn around and utilize or sell for more drugs. Who knows? As we're all kind of baking in the silence, 3 then brings up the fact that there's a ton of grow operations run by the cartels that operate in the middle of nowhere. Then 1 cuts back in to explain that they will occupy a piece of land on the wet side of a mountain and set up shop with like a whole irrigation system for either growing marijuana or processing cocaine. 1 even said that his uncle fought wildfires in California in the early 90s, and each camp had a safety briefing on the pot farms in the national forest, tripped wires, swivel guns, barbed wire. The tell was hoselays running from creeks. If we saw those, we were told to do a 180 and report it. 1 goes on to tell us that when he was younger he used to hike off into the woods all over, so he used to check in with a local friend whose father is on a cartel task force to ask if these areas are safe during those times of year. About 80% of the time it isn't safe. He said they have zero scare, and that one time he had found a stainless steel Colt 1911 with like diamonds and etched designs on the center console of a Chevy Silverado. The third possibility, regarding the mystery car, was that more than likely it wasn't just a couple of friendly strangers looking to make friends with us, and more like some people that might try to rob us. We're all still wired from shooting guns in close encounter, so we were already eager to get things moving along deeper in the woods. Either way, we figured the jig was up, and we had to move our campsite, which was fine because we didn't break anything out except for the guns and the weed. We all hopped in the truck. Once we get going crawling up this giant hill, Friend 4 lights up another blunt end. One looks 4 and looks at him like he is crazy. Then 4 responds back, and he says isn't it just nice to just relax and smoke some bud, after a long day of smoking bud. This out of nowhere comment combined with the tension caught me and 3 off guard so much that we couldn't stop laughing for like a full 2 minutes, even had to pull the truck over. After slow crawling for 2 to 4 miles through the sparse and dense woods, we found a smaller trail that branched off the trail that we crawled through. We followed the sub-trail about 1.5 miles before we found a clearing surrounded by dense tree and brush cover. Me and one started collecting wood for the fire and setting up teepees and laying down isomats for each of us. These teepees we bought in Reno were really cool because they all came with an extra piece of fabric and connection cords that we can make a little connecting tunnels to each other's tents. It's actually really cool. By the time we got our camp set up, it was probably about 3:30 in the morning. Still, a little stressed out from our close encounter. 3 and 4 started heating up a pot of baked beans and bratwurst over the fire, while I broke out the vodka and bourbon. Finally, we were able to relax and really enjoy ourselves in the middle of fucking nowhere. After we smoke 4 blunts back to back and we're each about 5 drinks in and 4 is already passed out in his tent. 3 is also the type of guy to view burnt food as still being good. So if you burn something in the campfire and just toss it, he'll get upset because it's still good. Anyway, that night we all get wasted and we're all eating dinner around the campfire. Out of nowhere, 3 in a super pissed off voice just yells out, "Who the hell dropped this? How many times do I have to tell you guys that burnt food is still good?" and then proceeds to pick up a rock from the campfire which fell out of place. Screams of pain echoed throughout the woods. Hug encounter. After walking for about 30 minutes, we decided to take a rest halfway up to the hill for a blunt break. I forgot what I said, but it was something funny, and we both started laughing, but then quickly covered our mouths. But immediately, after we hear bushing rustling towards the bottom part of the hill. We both look at each other as if to say, "Did you hear that too?" We started listening intently, hoping it was nothing but a squirrel. But then hear several grunts and snorts. One then steps forward and says, "Oh shit, is that a hog?" He looked at me and said, "If they charge you and you can't get out of the way, just turn sideways." Right then he spotted one about 100 yards downhill from him. The pig saw him at the same time, and before he even fired it started charging uphill. The hog tore up the hill so aggressively for a second, I thought the shotgun might just piss him off against a double shotgun. He fired once, then again. Both shots, double a buck, hit the pig's head but didn't kill it. He then went to hit it over the head a bunch of times with his stock before the pig died. Cracked the walnut stock and damaged the break-open mechanism of the shotgun. I stood there, absolutely dumbfounded by what I just saw. All that came out was "Holy fucking shit." He just gave me a smirk and shook his head as he walked back up the hill. "Wait, Ron," I asked him why he told me to turn sideways if I was charged. I was thinking this had something to do with their depth perception, right? Like, they might go right by you or something? To which he said, oh no. Being gored on the side of the leg is better than being gored in the groin. I had a bit too much to drink that night and we were sleeping in our tent. 3 and 1 also had drank quite a bit, so we forgot to clean up the campsite and left a bag of peanuts out on the picnic table. Because I was quite drunk and still wired from the day I wasn't asleep and was wide awake when 4 woke up to take a piss. He unzipped the tent and shined his flashlight outside and goes, "Oh shit." 3 is half asleep and mumbled. What then 4 said, There are mad raccoons out there, I say. How many is mad? He says. Like 7, I pause a moment then say. Wow. That is mad, the rest of us start cracking up. The raccoons freaked out and seeming borderline offended at 4's outburst, they ran off. We now for the rest of the trip keep referring to mad as a unit of measurement equal to 7, image attachment, large.
We didn't have a definite destination, so we agreed on doing this trip as spontaneous as possible. The only thing that we planned on was that ultimately after we camped we would end up somewhere outside Sacramento and stay in their neck of woods for a week or two before flying home to Texas.